Thick ash hung in the sky like a permanent haze, filtering sunlight into a sickly glow that tinted every structure in dull hues. Streets, once teeming with life, had crumbled under centuries of acid rain and shifting tectonic plates. Only one beacon of civilization remained, a single city clinging stubbornly to a battered plateau, encircled by towering walls of reinforced concrete. Within these walls, people continued to build their dreams upon shaky ground. They called this place Oasis, for it was the last bastion of technology in a dying world. Central to their survival lay an immense hydrofusion reactor, buried deep beneath their feet, a testament to humanity's capacity for innovation in the face of utter desolation. In the early days, the reactor had been lauded as a miraculous achievement, harnessing both water and solar resonance to provide stable energy. Without it, the city would wither in darkness, and its population would be forced into the wastes where little but roving scavenger bands and mutagenic storms thrived. Now, as resources waned, more and more people had started voicing doubts. Why situate everyone over some labyrinth of precarious engineering? Why had no one developed a backup plan? Strained from the endless demand threatened to push the reactor to its limits. The city's officials held daily reassurances, but tension was rising. Most recognized a single, inescapable truth. If anything happened to that reactor, life in Oasis would come to a swift end. Against this backdrop of uneasy stability, a new menace emerged, calling themselves the Lunatics. They were a small cult-like group who believed that humanity was meant to perish, that technology was the reason for the entire planet's downfall. They scoffed at the city's reliance on the hydrofusion reactor, preaching a natural return to the Earth's original state, for better, or, more pointedly, for worse. Dismissed as radicals at first, their numbers had grown alarmingly in recent months. They spread conspiracy flyers and scrawled graffiti across the once pristine walls. Even so, few truly believed they posed a threat until the day someone triggered a sabotage alarm at reactor control. Late one night, a low, thunderous hum reverberated through the city's underbelly. Oscillations traveled up through the floors of houses in the outskirts, rattling windows and scaring people awake. Alarms had been installed for precisely this scenario, sabotage or meltdown. The discordant clanging of red alert sirens erupted through every street, waking every breathing soul in Oasis at once. Soldiers, technicians, and concerned citizens scrambled to their stations as the city's overhead screens hissed and flickered out. A hush fell over the corridors leading to the reactor entrance. Security gates sealed shut automatically, and armed guards fanned out, their heads on swivels. Drones patrolled the upper levels of the reactor facility, scanning for any sign of intrusion. On one of those winding corridors, lined with thick steel grates and rows of humming cables, stood the chief reactor engineer, Daphne Vaughn. She had once prided herself on her precise knowledge of every valve, pipe, and control panel in the subterranean labyrinth. Now, she felt a cold stone of dread settle in her stomach, because the unknown threat lurking below could spell the end for everyone above. Daphne was not alone. At her side was Colonel Grayson, head of the city's security detail. His hair was going silver at the temples, and though he wore advanced ballistic armor, the worry lines on his face betrayed more strain than he cared to show. He had known the reactor's vulnerabilities for years. Too many sections were old. Too many systems lacked the resources to maintain them properly. "We need to isolate the sabotage," he said, voice low and urgent. "If the Lunatics gain access to the main coolant lines, we'll lose everything in a day." She nodded, gripping the handle of her diagnostic scanner. "I just need to get to the primary substation. Can you hold back any attackers while I check the damage?" "You have my word," Grayson said, though the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes told Daphne he had no illusions about what they were up against. The Lunatics had become increasingly bold. Their theology of destruction had recently escalated into bomb attacks on the city's infrastructure. This was different. This time, they had chosen the heart of Oasis, and the survival of everyone hinged on preventing them from crippling the hydrofusion reactor. As they advanced through the dimly lit corridors, they found the first signs of sabotage. Severed coolant pipes splayed in a corridor, water pooling across the floor and sending up clouds of steam in the frigid air. A cluster of bullet casings littered the concrete. Next to them lay a body, a uniformed guard with an insignia that suggested he'd been assigned to protect the crucial system, afloat in the deeper tunnels. Daphne's breath caught in her throat. War had never truly left the city. Violence smoldered beneath the surface here, tinted by desperation for survival. Grayson knelt beside the guard and gently shut his eyes. "Evisceration," he muttered, checking the surroundings. "And it's recent. They can't be far off." Daphne was about to respond when a jolt of pain shot through her eardrums. The overhead alarm siren suddenly swelled in pitch. She gritted her teeth and tapped her earpiece, hoping to shut down the ear-splitting shriek. After a few seconds, the volume lessened to something tolerable. A coded voice crackled through her headset. "Daphne, do you read me? This is Sergeant Liu. We've pinned down 3 lunatics in Sector 12. They're messing with the coolant distribution manifold. We need you to redirect the flow before it causes an overload." She steadied her voice. "Understood, I'm on my way." Then to Grayson. "Sector 12 is to the east. That's near the main sub-circuit. Let's hurry." They moved carefully, with Grayson's squad flanking them. Down vaulted corridors they heard the echo of ragged screams chanting from unseen throats. The lunatics. Their words were half-coherent incantations, peppered with mainstream language turned into twisted dogma. "End the cycle," they cried. "Purge the city and let the land reclaim it." A firefight erupted at the junction leading to Sector 12. Soldiers took cover behind reinforced pillars, returning fire at shadowy figures lurching in and out of the darkness. The lunatics wore patchwork rags, their faces streaked with war paint. Some had improvised weapons, spiked clubs, repurposed machetes, while others carried old rifles and shotguns. Bullets sparkled in the gloom, and muzzle flashes revealed the dreadful mania etched into the saboteurs' expressions. Colonel Grayson responded with disciplined fury. He signaled for a flanking maneuver, urging his men to contain the intruders. The firefight crescendoed in staccato bursts until, at last, the corridor fell still. Bodies, mostly those of the lunatics, lay scattered. But 2 soldiers were also down, their life's blood staining the gray floors. Grayson's face contorted in silent rage. Every loss brought the city one step closer to utter vulnerability. Daphne dashed past the fallen rebels, ignoring the reek of gunpowder and gore, her eyes fixed on the snaking pipes overhead, searching for the coolant manifold that was rumored to be under attack. She found the damage. A cluster of valves had been tampered with. Metallic shards glinted where protective covers should have been. Steam hissed out, and the lights above flickered erratically. She raised her diagnostic scanner and initiated a system override. The device beeped as she initiated recalibration, her fingers flying across the keypad. The readout was alarming. Already coolant pressure in adjacent sectors was spiking. If it reached the main reactor chamber, there'd be a catastrophic meltdown. Her breath rushed in shaky bursts. She forced herself to remain calm. With a few quick commands, she routed the superheated coolant into a backup loop. The manifold whined in protest, but the pressure reading began to stabilize. She sighed, half relieved. "The sabotage here is contained for now," she told Grayson, "but we have to check the rest of the lines." He nodded, finishing a radio command to his men. "We'll keep pushing forward. Let's hope that's the worst of it." Yet they both knew there could be deeper, more insidious sabotage hidden in the labyrinth below. No one had fully mapped the reactor's subbasements in decades. Decaying passageways, forgotten expansions, maintenance tunnels. A could be riddled with traps or further infiltration by the lunatics. They descended 2 levels down a spiral staircase draped with cables. The hum of heavy machinery intensified as they drew closer to the reactor core. Many of the corridor lights were now extinguished, casting everything in a sinister darkness. Flickers from emergency lamps gave glimpses of battered walls streaked with unfamiliar graffiti. Swirling lines, roughly painted skulls, messages proclaiming an end to men's false kingdoms. Rounding the bend, they stumbled upon a half-collapsed workshop, its entrance battered in. Tools lay scattered across the floor, and molten metal dripped from the ceiling, a sign of sabotage. with what looked like a makeshift plasma torch. Someone had tried and partially succeeded in breaching the sealed door to the next sector. "Careful," Grayson said, his voice a near whisper. "This place could be rigged with explosives." As if on cue, a faint beep emanated from behind a fallen table. Instantly, everyone in the group tensed. Daphne spotted a small blinking device lodged in a crevice near an electrolyte power coupling. Bomb. She swallowed hard, crouched low, and slid behind a support beam. Quiet as possible, she inched closer to the table. The device's lights pulsed in a slow but consistent pattern. A timer. She read the displayed digits, 5 minutes, and counting down. Working quickly, she retrieved a pair of wire cutters from her belt. "Cover me," she whispered, beckoning Grayson to get his men into position. Guns raised, they settled into protective stances around her, scanning the darkness for further traps or attacking lunatics. Daphne's hand trembled as she cut through the layered wires. Sparks flew and her heart pounded so violently she thought it would burst from her chest. She bit her lip and yanked the final wire free. A moment of taut silence. Then the light on the device winked out. Daphne exhaled an unsteady breath. She placed the disarmed bomb gently aside. Despite her training in reactor technology, improvised explosives were an entirely different field. She felt the electric adrenaline of near disaster coursing through her. "That was entirely too close," she murmured. Colonel Grayson gave a single nod, his hawk-like gaze still scanning the corners. "Good job. Let's move on before we find any more surprises." Pressing onward, they discovered a labyrinth of sabotaged hardware, severed lines, wires rerouted in nonsensical loops, hammered control panels. Each sector they passed, technicians would scramble to repair the damages. They were working frantically, but the sabotage was extensive and systematic. What unsettled Daphne the most was how well thought out the sabotage had been. The lunatics clearly had someone highly knowledgeable about the reactor's vulnerabilities feeding them information. At last they reached the central zone, a massive, cylindrical chamber, ringed by catwalks and instrumentation modules. The reactor core rose at the center, an immense tower thrumming with unstoppable energy. Arcs of glowing plasma coursed through transparent conduits, the heartbeats of Oasis's lifeline. Normally it radiated a reassuring hum, but tonight there was a perilous destabilization in its reverberations, a trembling that underscored each second ticking by. A small contingent of lunatics had barricaded themselves near the reactor's primary control station. The vantage point they'd taken included a narrow catwalk suspended high above a swirling coolant reservoir. If they managed to dump certain chemicals into that tank, the entire pipeline would become poisoned, eventually blowing out the valves. Explosions from the sabotage would almost certainly rip the city apart. Colonel Grayson directed his men to converge on multiple flanks. Gunfire erupted again. Bullets ricocheted off the metal railings. Lunatic snipers fired from hidden vantage points, forcing the soldiers to take cover. Daphne pressed into a recess behind a console, her heart hammering as she risked a glance at the control station. She spotted the bright flicker of a blowtorch. One of the lunatics was trying to break through the protective casing over the control rods. If they pulled even one rod out incorrectly, the chain reaction could go critical. She tried to stand, only to dive back down as bullets whizzed overhead. Grayson barked orders for a team to circle around, but the catwalk was treacherous, and the lunatics had the advantage of high ground. It was a standoff that doubled as a ticking time bomb. Without warning, the overhead lights dimmed, flickered, and died. The entire chamber plunged into darkness, except for the fizzling glow from the reactor's plasma lines. From within that darkness came laughter, manic, triumphant. Daphne felt a chill run through her. She flicked on her headlamp and the bobbing beam illuminated the mad grin of one of the saboteurs. He was perched against a railing, a battered rifle in one hand. He spoke in a guttural mockery of reason, voice echoing, "You cling to life. You do not deserve. The city is doomed. Why fight?" "We can fix this," Daphne called, voice cracking. She wasn't even sure why she responded, but desperation burned within her. She couldn't allow centuries of effort in the last vestige of civilization to be snuffed out by these nihilists. A bullet struck the console behind her, sending up sparks. The lunatic cackled, retreating deeper into the shadows. Momentum shifted. Grayson managed to lead a small band forward under covering fire. One saboteur toppled, shot through the chest. He tumbled off the catwalk and plunged into the swirling coolant below. Undeterred, the others pressed on, chanting their twisted slogans. Daphne realized there was one gambit left. She might be able to bypass the sabotaged control rods from a secondary override console below the main platform. It was supposed to be an emergency fallback from meltdown scenarios. If she could reach it, she could lock the rods in their current position, preventing physical removal. That would at least buy the security teams enough time to neutralize the lunatic. Just shouted to Grayson over the din, and he nodded, signaling 2 soldiers to escort her. During a brief lull in the firefight, Daphne leapt from cover and sprinted toward the metal staircase leading below. Shots followed her, but they missed in the gloom. She descended into the tight walkway flanked by flickering hazard lights. The muffled clash of gunfire resounded overhead. Each step brought her deeper into a place few had ever ventured. The heavy steel door marked the entrance to the override room. She tapped the access panel, but it sparked and emitted a shrill error tone. Power had likely been cut. One of her escorts, an older soldier named Darrow, used a pry bar to wedge open the door just enough for her to squeeze through. Inside, the narrow chamber was crammed with archaic electronics manual switches, old data cables, mechanical readouts. Ghostly green light from the reactor's core filters cast swirling patterns across the walls. Daphne's eyes found the override console, a squat metal desk with bulky levers and dials. She rushed over, powering it with her portable battery kit. The panel came to life with a crackle and hum, and a flickering display read, "System malfunction control, rod access compromised." Her hands flew over the controls, inputting an emergency lockdown. She typed in an authentication code to confirm her credentials. For a breathless second, nothing happened. Then the console beeped acceptance, and she felt a faint vibration through the floor. The reactor's mechanical arms were sealing the rods in place, physically locking them to prevent removal. At the same time, a warning message flashed about coolant pressure nearing overload in Sector 18. Gritting her teeth, Daphne toggled a command to divert the pressure. She can't do anything about structural damage from sabotage now, just mitigate each blow as it comes. A sudden shriek from behind made her spin. The soldier Darrow was grappling was a lunatic who must have slipped in behind them. The saboteur had a serrated blade. They stumbled across the checkerboard floor, locked in a lethal dance. The second soldier tried to intervene but took a savage slash to the arm. Blood spattered the console and he fell with a pained cry. Darrow howled, smashing the lunatic's face with the pry bar. The saboteur sank to his knees, spitting blood and cursing. Without hesitation, Darrow struck again, the metal bar colliding with a sickening crunch. Then there was silence. Gasping, the soldier with the arm wound clutched at his gash. Darrow slung the injured man's good arm around his shoulder, ready to move. "I've got the override," Daphne breathed, heart pounding in her chest. "We need to get back up, help Colonel Grayson end this fight." They made a hasty retreat, not daring to linger. When they emerged onto the main platform, a fierce battle was still raging. Several of the lunatics lay motionless, but a handful remained, fighting with the ferocity of cornered animals. Gunshots echoed, while voices on both sides cried out in pain or victory. Smoke from muzzle flashes drifted through the chamber, illuminated by the reactor's eerie glow. Daphne spotted Grayson pinned against a console by 2 saboteurs wielding steel rebar. A soldier covered him from a distance, but struggled to get a clear shot. She caught a glimpse of her ammunition-laden comrade to the left, but he was down, pinned by debris. Summoning her remaining courage, she hastened toward Grayson's position. Her breath came in ragged bursts, each step feeling heavier than the last. She found a discarded pistol near a bloody uniform. Her hand closed around its grip. When she looked up, one of the rebar-wielding lunatics was raising a deadly blow to strike Grayson. Daphne fired. The bullet hit the target's leg. With a cry of anguish, he collapsed, and Grayson capitalized on the distraction by tackling the second cultist. The man's weapon clattered to the floor. "Colonel," Daphne called over the roar of chaos. "Control rods are locked down. They can't cause a meltdown through rod removal." Relief flickered in his eyes, and he nodded. Soldiers, push them back, protect the coolant lines. The last pockets of the lunatics nearest to the control station broke ranks, trying to flee. Some scrambled along the catwalk. One attempted to lob a small explosive device, but a soldier's bullet caught him mid-throw, sending the explosive sailing harmlessly into the reservoir below, where it detonated with a dull thump, sending up a brief geyser of coolant. Bit by bit, the defenders overwhelmed the surviving saboteurs. The chanting turned to panic screams as the lunatics realized their sabotage was rapidly failing. Some tried to stand their ground, shouting their apocalyptic creed to the bitter end. Others tried in vain to vanish into the labyrinth, only to be cut off by soldiers or pinned down by turret fire from drones that entered overhead. At length, the gunfire tapered off, echoing into uneasy silence. Amid the carnage of the final battle, the swirling reactor core still shimmered. Technicians flooded back in, working tardy miracles, sealing damaged valves, extinguishing stray fires, recalibrating the coolant lines. Daphne and Grayson moved among them, ensuring no saboteur had hidden behind the massive pipes or among corpses. They found none that remained alive, only the grim reality of what had transpired. Broken bodies, battered metal, acrid smoke, and the unrelenting hum of machinery. At last, Grayson removed his helmet, wiping sweat and grime from his brow. He surveyed the battered chamber. "My men will mop up," he told Daphne. "How's the reactor status?" She glanced at her diagnostic scanner, letting out a cautious exhale. "Stable. The sabotage was extensive, but we managed to avert the worst. We'll need days, maybe weeks, to repair everything." He nodded. "We still have a city to protect. Animals on the outside, fanatics within, but you saved us all tonight." Her gaze roamed the chamber, landing on the battered catwalk, the broken door, the countless bullet holes marking the walls. "I just did what any of us would do," she said, though she knew how close they'd come to total annihilation. "We have to remain vigilant. If the lunatics struck once, they'll try again." Grayson frowned. "Perhaps they will, but after this defeat, maybe not so soon. The real question is how many more of them are hiding among the city's populace, waiting for a chance to sabotage the last vestige of hope we have." In the weeks that followed, Oasis strove to rebuild. Daphne worked around the clock, directing teams of engineers to replace the shredded cables, patch the coolant lines, and seal the holes left by bombs. Security around the reactor complex doubled, and everyone learned to keep an ear out for rumors of the lunatics' whereabouts. The sabotage had shaken the city to its core, but it had also galvanized the population. Thousands volunteered to reinforce the reactor's defenses or join neighborhood watch patrols to detect suspicious activity. With each passing day, the city reclaimed a bit more of its usual rhythm, a battered routine, but routine nonetheless. Daphne often revisited the reactor chamber late at night, checking readouts and running extra diagnostics. The heavy hush of the sleeping city pressed down on the subterranean halls. It was during one of those quiet vigils that Colonel Grayson found her perched on a walkway, staring down at the luminous lines of water and plasma. "You can't save the city all by yourself, you know," he said gently. She shook her head. "I'm not trying to. I just can't sleep after what happened." "Nor can I," Grayson replied. "But we survive, and we keep watch. That's how Oasis has stayed alive this long. Even after sabotage, after near meltdown, we're still here." She turned her eyes from the swirling energy to meet his. "Will we ever be anything more than just surviving?" A thoughtful silence stretched for a moment. "If we protect what we have," he finally said, "maybe we'll rediscover what it means to hope, what it means to truly live." Those words lingered in the hush of the reactor chamber. Outside, the city's battered spires and residential tents huddled under a choking sky, waiting for a dawn that would hopefully be just a bit brighter. In the distant wastes, storms gathered, and scattered raider tribes roamed, oblivious to the drama unfolding in Oasis's underbelly. But the people within those walls clung to each moment of victory. They had faced sabotage at the lifeline of their civilization, though the confrontation had left its scars: bloodshed, shattered steel, lingering nightmares. The reactor still thrummed its steady pulse. The city endured, and as dawn broke, perhaps for the 1,000th time since the world had collapsed around them, one thing was clear: life went on, sustained by resolute hearts and the inextinguishable belief that tomorrow could somehow be salvaged from the ruins of yesterday.